Planning your next post-COVID vacation? Be prepared with the help and expert advice of the Travel Guys.
Hello and welcome to the Travel Guys, our weekly show on travel, what's happening, what's new and what's interesting in the wonderful world of travel. Now today I'm delighted to have a guest today is Duane Emeny, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Air Chathams. Welcome, Duane.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's very good to be here.
I'm a bit of an aviation buff and it's always fascinating me the history of A, air services to the Chathams, and B, the history of your company. As I think you started, was it 1984 you started? Can you explain how the company started?
Yeah, absolutely. So family business. My father's a passionate aviator and he was out on the Chatham Islands in the early 80s, actually working for another company called Mount Hutt Air, which were a very small airline. And he got married my mum, so married a local, and then could see some of the challenges that the island had, mainly around exporting some of the high value crayfish off the island. And actually in those years it wasn't that high value, it was all controlled through the main packing companies, and the fishermen basically had no choice but to go through those companies. So what he was able to do in some ways over a period of time was break through that and give those independent fishermen the opportunity to fly their live crayfish product directly into the New Zealand market, or mainland New Zealand market, and then obviously attract a better price for that. And over time it kind of broke down the barriers and enabled that industry to really grow, and the airline at the same time.
And what did you start with? What was the aircraft you started with?
So it was a little Cessna 337, affectionately known as the Push Me Pull You. So it was centerline thrust, had an engine on the back, engine on the front.
Okay, I've seen that.
He's certainly told me a lot of stories. I remember as a very small child growing up, flights between Pitt Island and Chatham Islands, which are two neighbouring islands in the group. And it was always a lot of fun. We always had aeroplanes around us growing up, and obviously I trained to be a pilot. I always wanted to be a pilot, and it was from a very early age. I guess that was instilled in me too. And
you're still flying?
Absolutely. Yep.
Commercially as well as, or just recreationally?
Right. No, bit of both, but mainly commercially. I was probably 2 years ago. I was still flying 3 of our aircraft types that we operate, and I've scaled that back a bit as my administrative duties caught up with me.
Okay, so you started in 94, and then the passenger services to the mainland started, was it 91, did I read?
Yeah, early 90s. The real turning point for Air Chathams was when Craig invested in the Metroliner, the Fairchild Metroliner aircraft, and up until that point it had really been ad hoc in nature, so whenever there was enough fish to fly out to the mainland, or perhaps a charter group, or some products that needed to come in, whether it be mail, groceries, things like that, then you'd be able to put flights on. But the early 90s and the investment in the Metroliner, which was huge for his company at the time, really turned the corner, and then he was able to operate those scheduled services to Wellington, Christchurch predominantly, and into Napier as well.
What's the distance, by the way, to those three? What's the actual flying
the closest distance to shore is 400 miles, so about 700 kilometres.
Yep.
So it's a fair way east. Christchurch, you're looking at about 450 miles, Wellington 420 miles.
Okay. Just one thing, for the 5 people in New Zealand who don't know where the Chathams are, can you actually put them on the map for us?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And basically, if you draw a line off the South Island, due east about 700 kilometres, that's where the Chathams are.
Okay.
Right in the middle of the roaring 40s, so we get all the best of the weather.
Yep.
But it also makes the island what it is.
Yep. And there's actually 10 islands. I didn't realise that, but there's only the 2 inhabited. Is that right?
Correct. Only 2 inhabited. So Chatham Island and Pitt Island. And the population of Pitt Island is about 35 people.
And it's only a skip and a jump by air?
Yeah, 20-minute flight or 2 hours on a boat.
Just the Chathams itself. What's the attraction to people to live there? And I'm asking a person who's born and bred, so
yes.
You're very biased, of course.
Yes.
But first to live, and secondly to visit as a tourist.
It takes a special kind of person or family, I think, to live on the Chatham Islands. So there are a group or a number of large family groups that have just been there traditionally, and most of the island's population can whakapapa back to those groups in some way. But then, of course, over time, other families have moved to the island. We had a large number of families actually move to the Chatham Islands from the deep south, and I think at the end of the day, the climate and weather, was very similar to the Chathams, and also the big fishing communities, so crayfishing, abalone, paua. So that kind of attracts people to the island, is that fishing industry and the ability to be quite hardy and resilient. Used to that remote style of life, subsistence farming, fishing, things like that. So yeah, it does take a special person. I think you've got to be aware of the remoteness, and that is what a lot of people struggle with. But I think that's also the magic of the island too, and that's really what attracts visitors to the island now.
Post-COVID, or just during COVID, or as we came out of it, the Chathams are the most oversubscribed tourist destination in the world.
Correct.
In relationship to
quite
what
a
we're
nice
getting
statistic,
before.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, so that's one of my roles too. I'm the chairperson of Tourism Chatham Islands, so I'm quite involved in that side of the island, and it's really exciting actually, and we're finally getting, I guess, recognised. COVID certainly helped a lot with that, but we're getting government funding through PGF, and it's allowing the island to see the real potential for tourism, because I think there has been some negativity around it. I mean, islanders like the island way of life, and it's difficult for them to accept new or foreign people coming into that environment. But I think that seeing the way infrastructure is building, and more jobs for locals, more flights available because there's more people to carry, all of those things are having a positive impact on the island population. So it's just continue to build on those things. And one of the things that we have had is overwhelmingly positive feedback from people that have been out to the island just because of the hospitality. Absolutely.
It's like all things in travel, you've got to sell the right product to the right people. Accommodation on the island and population, two different things I know, but can you just give this indication?
So population 680 people at last count, and accommodation is only about 150 beds on the island.
But good standard?
Yeah, I believe so. From what I've seen, you've got the primary accommodation, which is through the hotel, and that's been there for years and years and years. But as I say, as tourism's grown, there's been a number of others pop up too, and some really high quality B&B options on the Chathams. Excellent. And again, lots of really positive feedback from those.
Okay. Well, I think we could keep talking about the Chathams for the whole time you're here with us, but we've got a lot more to talk about. Can you run through the route structure of Air Chathams, the places you service?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously there is the Chatham Islands, which we connect with Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland. So there is a flight most days to one of those centres. The aircraft is always based on the island, so it flies off the Chathams into those main centres.
And that aircraft is?
That's an ATR 72. So we've recently upgraded that off the back of COVID. We did have the beautiful Convair 580, which was flying the route, and obviously that attracted a lot of attention, especially from our plane spotting community, because it is such a beautiful classic aeroplane. It'll be a very sad day when we finally retire those. Then the rest of the airline, which is what's really grown in the last 6 years, is based around Auckland. So as you may be aware, as your viewers may be aware, Air New Zealand made some commercial decisions about 6 years ago, where they started to withdraw some of their services from the smaller regional communities such as Whakatane. So we were able to go in and pick up the Eastern Bay network, connecting that to Auckland. So as I say, been there for 6 years. Shortly thereafter, Whanganui, so we connect to Whanganui and Auckland as well. That's 36 flights a week, Whakatane 38 flights a week, all pre-COVID numbers. Obviously it's dropped back a little bit since then. And in most recent times, 2018, we picked up the direct flight between the Kapiti Coast and Auckland. And so yeah, it's been good. It's been good for the growth of our business, and it's allowed us to take a lot of the learnings we had from being a predominantly passenger scheduled airline in the Kingdom of Tonga, and we were able to bring a lot of those learnings back to the New Zealand market.
So fascinating, must have been a fascinating time for you. Were you based up there?
Yes, yeah, I lived in Tonga for 3 years.
So you operated a domestic service in Tonga?
Correct.
Okay, out to Hapai and
Vava'u? Hapai Group, Vava'u, the Newers, so we used to fly up there twice a week, and also to Ewa, which was the shortest commercial flight, 6-minute flight.
Okay, I know people in the Tonga, and you were very well respected up there, your reputation up there particularly. And then the next international destination, of course, is Norfolk, which is pretty exciting. Yeah,
and that was a big step for us, and we were very excited and proud of that one, because it was our first international scheduled service under the Air Chathams brand, and it took a lot of work.
When did you start up?
So that was, that's a very good question, 2019, September 2019. So just prior to that, we were working with a lot of travel agency wholesalers here in New Zealand,
Yes.
and we were only doing charter flights into Norfolk. So it gave us experience operating that route. And then from there, we were able to use that to develop that scheduled service as well. So it was really growing and gaining some real momentum. Unfortunately, COVID, like a lot of things, has slowed that.
Big time.
But we're really excited about getting back there in May. So.
Yeah, so 27th of May, I think, is this. And
correct.
With once weekly service, and I believe we're going to twice weekly in August. Is that correct?
Yeah. So kickstarting it on the 27th of May, and we've changed the aircraft type. So we were operating the Convair. We're going to go to the Saab, which is slightly smaller, but it is a nice passenger product.
Yep.
And then from the 2nd of August, we're going to introduce the second flight, which will be a Monday flight. So it'll be a Monday and a Thursday. And our thinking behind that is it allows people to have that longer weekend, Thursday to Monday or Monday to Thursday on the island. And as you know, I mean, you're very experienced with Norfolk Island and how amazing that place is. And I've spent a week up there on holiday myself. And it doesn't matter what age you are, as far as I'm concerned. It's a beautiful place. Loved the golf, loved the food, loved the beaches. Yep. Went out on a fishing charter too, and I've done a bit of fishing on the Chathams, and it's pretty similar in terms of the time before you get something on the line.
They don't call it fishing; they call it catching.
No, it's good. And I think they've got an exclusive economic zone around Norfolk, but it's not overfished, and the locals are great in terms of their approach to it. So, the charterer was very clear. He said, "Hey, this is about looking after our island and sustainability. Yep. We're going to catch you enough here that you can take it back to the hotel and have it cooked up, and they'll do that for you." But this is our island. We want to keep it the way it is.
Yeah, I've had quite an experience promoting Norfolk Island.
Yep.
So for some many years, my company represented Norfolk Island tourism in the country, so I know it very well. Yes. And it's a fascinating place. It's our closest international destination.
Yep.
It's only small. It's only, I think, 5 k's by about 8 k's by memory.
Yes.
Population of about 1,800, but fiercely I know a lot of them, when there was problems with Australia, they wanted to come and join New Zealand.
Yes.
There's still a lot of people up in Norfolk.
Still do, yeah.
And they're not Australians. We're Norfolk.
Can't blame them for that, though, can we?
And God Save the Queen's still the national anthem.
That's right. Yeah.
But I've got a lot I could talk a lot about some of the fascinating stories. But people don't also realise that in Emily Bay, it's got one of the most beautiful swimming beaches in the world.
Gorgeous.
It is just
gorgeous.
stunning.
Yep.
And it's great snorkeling, great swimming. And
it's so safe. That's what I liked about it. The way the coral reef is formed around that bay. You're completely protected. So it's I was a fan. Certainly after that week spent up there, I could have spent another week easily. And
I love the fact that because so many of the population are part of the Norfolk Island descendants, that you look at the phone book, and as you know, you'll see all the knobs, and you'll see all the various names for Christians and so on. Yep. And it's such an minute situation that you look at the phone book, and half of the phone book is nicknames. Because there's so many Christians, there's so many knobs, there's so many of these it's one is Leaf and the son's lettuce leaf.
Yep.
You'll get some hilarious characters up there. I've played golf there once, and when they called out the prizes, it was all by nickname. There wasn't a proper name used at all. Everyone knew who they were. It was great fun.
No, they're good people, and as you say, there's a lot of quite incredible history there with the bounty mutineers, and then of course with the first settlements out of Australia and the penal colonies, it was fairly grim actually, and so
unbelievably.
The
story is incredible. I mean, just walking through that graveyard is the most moving experience.
Yep.
Just extraordinary. But I find it incredible too that our viewers may not be aware, but it was populated by the descendants of the mutiny on the Bounty, which settled on Pitcairn Island, but that's 1.5 miles by 2 miles. So they completely outgrew that. Around 70, I think it was, were picked up by the British government, taken to Norfolk Island. They were descendants of the mutineers, so there was no penalties involved. But as they grew, this is in Norfolk, by say 5-6 k's by 8 k's, that got too busy for them. So about 50 went back to Pitcairn.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's a really interesting history. But how long's the flight, by the way?
So for us, it's 2 hours 45, and that's in the Saab aircraft.
Yep.
And so it's a good length, and You get the old-fashioned Air Chathams service, which is tea, coffee and a Tim Tam biscuit, which we're pretty proud of.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to love. That's a story in itself when I tried to get rid of the Tim Tams on the Wanganui run and we had outrage.
So I love that.
Brought those back very quickly, but no, it is. We do things differently. I mean, we are a family business, and the routes we fly are just so important to us. It's they have to work, so we put 110% effort into those, and we treat our customers exceptionally well, and that gets us that loyalty.
Great. The company service, that's working out okay, because it was contentious with Air New Zealand. They were there, then they weren't, and they weren't, and then they pulled out. And then I know the people in the company, the Parapara Umu,
Yep.
Were very upset about it, weren't they, when they pulled out?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So pleased to see you guys.
I think it's been under a cloud forever, Kapiti. I mean, it really was one of New Zealand's busiest airports at one point. They had a number of training organisations based there, plus you have all of the traffic that connects between the North Island and South Island. Where it has been difficult is developing and maintaining that commercial link to Auckland. Air New Zealand did very well on that route, but it was always a peak traveller route only. They really couldn't, and neither could we for that matter, pick up the off-peak stuff. It's just once the traffic dissipates going south into Wellington and north into Palmerston North, it's very challenging with especially the jet prices out of Wellington to compete with a turboprop.
Yes.
So it is a market that is around that peak domestic traveller. And generally business traveller going into Auckland. So we've certainly picked up a little bit of the off-peak and people that are connecting internationally, but your core market, 80-85% of your market is business travellers into Auckland.
Okay. Yep. Just talking about the Convair. Now, just tell me if this is true or not, because I heard this story a few years ago that, they're a great looking plane. I think they were wonderful. But they're 60, 70 years old?
Yeah, so I mean, our aircraft, they were the 340 or the 440 piston radials when they first started their life, and then it wasn't until the mid to late 60s that they were re-engined and turned into the Convair 580.
Which is a jet prop engine, isn't
Correct.
it? Same as the Viscounts and the other ones at the time.
C-130 Hercules, same engine, so the Allison engine. And that's really what made the aircraft. So prior to that, Convair was predominantly military aircraft, and that was their first sort of foray into the civilian stuff, and it really built the company. So I mean, the 580s were flying all around North America and into Europe as domestic carriers for many years, and then they entered the jet age with the 880s and aircraft like those.
So Coronado, the 990.
Yeah, and themselves, I mean, beautifully engineered aeroplanes, and but obviously they lost out. I think it was the DC-10 probably got most of the market share at that time.
Yeah.
So, but the 580's been amazing. It built our company. Craig bought his first one into the country in 1996. They were already here with the Freightways. They had a couple doing the freight network up and down the country, but it was the first passenger aircraft. And what was so special about it is that it was a combination aircraft, so you could operate it as full passenger, full freight, or a combination of varying passengers and freight. It also had a rear cargo door installed on it, so that we could, it was a large cargo door, hydraulic actuated cargo door, and you could run pallets and cargons into the back of the aircraft. So, it wasn't unusual that we would have a full plane load of passengers. I think it would carry 39 passengers, and then within 45 minutes you've taken all the seats out, you've turned it into a full freighter, and then you've got 6 tonne of freight going back the other way. So as I said, it really built the company. I think a lot of people thought my father was a little bit crazy when he got an aircraft that large at that time, but now it's too small. So for us it was the challenge was, what do we do post-COVID? And we had the ATR, which was engaged on high-end charters for a company called Telk International. Unfortunately, due to COVID, very hard to get people into the country, so that had to end, and we had to look at where our investment was lay at that point, and basically retrofit the ATR so that it could fly oceanically out to the Chathams. So that took about 3 months, and then we got our approvals, and that was unfortunately in some ways the beginning of the end for the Convairs for us, because
where are they now? You still got them?
Yeah, we've still got 2 that are operational, and they're here in Auckland. But by September this year, they'll be retired fully.
Okay.
So,
did I hear the story correctly, though, that your father was needing to buy a simulator, and somebody quoted a ridiculously high price?
Yes.
But then they said, "Oh, but we'll chuck a plane in with it." Is that? No.
Well, sort of. No. So what happened is there were 2 Convair aircraft for sale from a company called Air Aviation based over in Alaska, and somehow Craig heard about these aircraft, and as he did jump on an airplane, went over for a bit of a look with an engineer, and they looked through them and they were quite happy with the aircraft. And then of course the same company had a simulator, so he went and had a look at that, and he thought that was pretty awesome too. So as Dad does, he said, "Oh well, I'll take the lot, and this is the price I'll give you," and they agreed to it. Okay. So
close, but not quite. But
it was quite a. Yeah, he still looks back at that particular flight as one of his most favourite, because they had the two airplanes. One had the long-range fuel tanks, one didn't. So one had to fly all the way back through sort of Alaska, Russia, China, and get back down to New Zealand, whereas he was able to come down through San Fran, Honolulu, and across the Pacific. So, yeah, I mean, amazing airplane.
Be good stories to tell there too.
Yeah. And we've got the simulator, so that's all set up on the Chatham Islands now. And I guess once we retire the Convairs from commercial service, we'll be able to look at what we use the simulator for. So that might be a lovely tourism project for the Chatham Islands.
So Duane, your father started the business, and then you had no choice, I guess, to be interested in aviation and wanting to fly. How did it happen? Did you just walk and do it yourself?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I mean, I think in the early days there was certainly a lot of aviation around me and in my life, but I'm told by my parents that when I was about 5 years old, I was telling everyone actually that would listen, that I was going to be a pilot and I was going to fly for Air Chathams.
Nice
and that's pretty much what happened. I was as soon as I left high school, graduated from high school, and went straight into University, Massey University in Palmerston North. Did 2 years of flying training there, then finished my third year extramurally and went flying. So I was in a Metroliner flying freight and people at 19, and yeah, I've been doing it ever since. So 37.
And what's your favourite aircraft?
My favourite aircraft will have to be the Convair. I mean, I just love that air. It was just a big old bus, and I loved it. It was. I mean, I've only just recently stopped flying it. And what I loved about the Convair was it was a very honest aircraft. So they control well, a bit heavy, but plenty of power. They built when fuel was cheap, and plenty of power, get you out of trouble, get above the weather. Really good anti-icing equipment. I mean, I could go on to pilot tech, but that's just an excellent airplane, and well designed. And hey, I've flown things that are a little bit more modern now, but yeah, the heart's still there.
And finally, on airplanes, you've got the venerable old DC-3 you're still flying.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yep.
I think I read somewhere that there's still around 400 flying around the world, designed and built in the 30s.
Yes.
It's just an amazing aircraft that they can just...
Yep. Every DC-3's got a story. Our one particularly has an amazing story. So it was US Defence Force. It apparently came off the production line at the same time as the Russians were running through Berlin, and then of course the war ended sometime not far after that, and they gifted a whole lot to New Zealand. And that was one of them. And the Prince of Tonga, he had an affinity for aviation and all things British and military and also obviously in this case American. So he got the DC-3s up there and put them to work with his airline Pialva, and that's kind of where we came across it, because it was sitting in a hangar. It had been abandoned. My father, being a passionate aviation enthusiast, couldn't see it being pulled to pieces. So he was able to get a couple of people that knew what they were dealing with to come from New Zealand and put it back together. And once we had this aircraft back together, I guess it was a case of what do you do with it, and so Dad put it to work. He started flying it up to the Harpai group, and actually it did a much better job than our Metroliner aircraft, because DC-3s have really good short field performance.
Yes.
So it could take a full load out of Harpai, and that was enough for us to keep it flying. And then we brought it back to New Zealand. For me, when I was flying it, you'd be sitting there with your hand on the control column and just thinking, I wonder how many other people have done this and where.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is an honour to get that type rating in your logbook. Yep.
It's a great fleet you've got, really is. It's really the whole history of the company is fascinating. And but we just recap again. Can we just recap on the destinations again, just for viewers to make sure?
I mean, a lot of people see the name and they think Air Chathams, they only fly to the Chatham Islands.
That's why I want to stress that point again.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know just how much the company has grown in the 37 years that we've been around. So obviously the Chathams, we connect those with Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland, but and in more recent times we're the connection for Auckland to the Eastern Bay of Plenty, so Whakatane Airport, Wanganui, Kapiti Coast, and as we've said, on the 27th of May we'll be flying back into Norfolk Island, and really excited about that. So, and on top of that we also have a really large charter business as well, so we do a lot of group charter, We fly rugby teams around, we fly musicians around, you know.
Those will have some stories in themselves, wouldn't they?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yep. No, it is. It's fun business, and I think anyone that's been involved with aviation, you know, I've talked to a lot of people that have been in aviation and left, and they always look back at it really fondly. It's a very unique industry, and yeah.
Okay, so what's the website address?
So airchathams.co.nz for us. Okay. Otherwise, good old-fashioned service if you want to talk to someone, 0800 580 127. 580
127. And that's for any bookings, package holidays to Norfolk. Do you do those, or refer them to the travel?
We try to work with wholesalers. They you know, that's their specialty. They do it better. But we work with a lot, so definitely give us a call and we can recommend some.
Good, because I try and push very much the travel agents to viewers of the show. They've had a really tough time, and so the more support we can give the travel industry, the better.
Yes.
And there are some very good travel agents out there. So I think it's a good point. Call you guys first. You can recommend agents who know what they're doing. Yep. And let's hope those Norfolk Island packages start selling well again too.
Yeah, it looks like it's picking up. So we're confident with what we're seeing in the early days.
Yeah. And any future plans? Any expansion?
Yeah, I think for us, you know, now we're getting larger, and we're looking at our airline and how it's structured and what we're going to do going forward. And I think, you know, the ATR 72 is going to be a big part of that.
70 seats, isn't it? 72.
Yeah. So I mean, we purchased one off Air New Zealand recently, one of their 500 series aircraft. So they've moved to the 600 series fleet. So we were able to purchase that one specifically for Talc. And now we've rolled it out onto the Chatham Islands, and it's been very effective over there. We've also invested very heavily in the Saab 340, which is another beautiful aeroplane, exceptionally well designed and perfect for the conditions here in New Zealand. So they were operated for many years by Air Nelson under the Air New Zealand banner.
Yes.
So they're great for the regionals services that we provide. So I can see us, you know, being more, involved with those more modern aircraft with the ATR and Saab, and then right now it's a very crucial point in the infrastructure fund coming through government. They're looking at spending some money on the Chatham Islands runway, so they'll take it from what it is now, which is just under 1,400 metres, out to 1,800 metres. So that effectively future-proofs the island for the next 25 years. And allows an airline like Air Chathams to look at how do we develop that market to maybe look at a jet aircraft. So I think that's something that my father would certainly like to, you know, a nice swan song for him would be to type rate himself in a jet, and that, I think he'd be happy then.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Good one. Thanks again for all your time. It's been really great to have you on board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.